Seat 24A was one of those middle-row, over-the-wing seats that passengers chose reluctantly, like picking the last chocolate chip cookie in a box, acceptable, but hardly memorable. Maya Cross slid into it with a practiced casualness, a backpack slung across her shoulder, a gray hoodie pulled up to shield her from curious eyes. She adjusted her earbuds and pressed play, letting the muted hum of the cabin engines merge with the soft, hypnotic rhythm of the playlist she'd curated for this flight. Around her, the plane thrummed with the usual mix of chatter, rolling carts, and the occasional cry of an infant, creating a soundscape she had memorized over thousands of flights. But tonight, every noise seemed louder, sharper, more urgent. She barely noticed the passengers around her at first. A businessman 3 rows ahead argued quietly with his wife about window shades. A teenager across the aisle tapped furiously at a phone screen, earbuds tangled, mumbling to himself. Maya observed it all with a detached precision, a habit cultivated over years of hiding in plain sight. To anyone else, she was just another face lost in the crowd, a commuter with no distinguishing features. But she had learned that, in moments of crisis, invisibility could be the greatest weapon. Her fingers tapped lightly on her phone as she scrolled through emails she didn't intend to answer. Work, bills, meaningless social notifications. Then her thumb hovered over a notification she almost didn't recognize. At first glance, it looked like spam, an automated push message from a government app she had long forgotten she had installed. But the header made her freeze. Raptor Actual Secure Channel. Maya's heart stuttered. It had been 3 years since she last saw that call sign, 3 years since she walked away from the life that had defined her. She had traded F-22s and classified operations for anonymity, civilian life, and a routine that was mercifully unremarkable. Now, as the plane rumbled along the taxiway, she felt a pulse of something she hadn't felt in years. Tension, the raw, electric edge of danger. She pushed the phone back into her pocket, taking a slow, measured breath. "Excuse me, miss," a voice called, pulling her briefly out of her thoughts. A flight attendant hovered nearby, clipboard in hand, scanning the cabin with a mix of routine and mild irritation. "Do you need any assistance with your seat?" Maya shook her head, offering the faintest nod, a polite smile. "I'm fine, thank you." The attendant moved on and Maya exhaled silently. Her eyes flicked to the window, watching the wet tarmac streak by as the plane inched forward. Engine spooled with that low, mechanical growl that always hinted at motion at transition. She could feel the vibration through the floor up into her seat. Every pilot, every operative she had trained with had described it. The anticipation, the half-second before acceleration, when the machine waits with bated breath, and then movement. She slid her bag to her feet and unclipped her seatbelt momentarily, a small ritual she performed to stay alert. The plane turned, angling toward the runway, and she felt the subtle roll of the aircraft as it aligned with the tarmac. Around her, passengers murmured, adjusted trays, and fidgeted. One man in a polo shirt muttered complaints about the lack of legroom. A mother tried to quiet her young child, promising candy and toys that weren't in her bag. Maya observed it all, mentally cataloging the normalcy, the mundane, that fragile illusion that the world outside the cabin's walls was predictable, safe. Then came the first anomaly. A sharp, mechanical whine, almost imperceptible over the engine roar, threaded through the fuselage. Maya's head snapped up, earbuds falling slightly askew. She pressed a finger to her ear, straining. The whine repeated, longer this time, higher pitched, like metal scraping against ice, but not random. It was rhythmic, deliberate. Her pulse quickened, every muscle in her body coiling without conscious thought. A passenger near the window jerked, pointing vaguely. Did anyone hear that? The flight attendant paused mid-step, scanning the cabin, tension creeping into her otherwise professional composure. Maya, for her part, remained calm outwardly, but inside every nerve was screaming. That sound, it wasn't turbulence. It wasn't the usual mechanical creaks of an aircraft settling. It was external, foreign, uninvited. Her phone vibrated again, faintly, pressing against her thigh like a pulse she couldn't ignore. She hesitated, then pulled it out. Another encrypted message, this one blinking insistently on the screen. Confirm receipt Raptor actual. The words burned like fire in her mind. Her past, buried deep beneath years of civilian life, had found her. Maya took a measured breath and glanced around. No one seemed to notice anything unusual. The teenager with tangled earbuds continued tapping furiously at his screen. The businessman's argument had escalated to a muttered threat about turbulence. The flight attendant smiled politely at a passenger struggling with the overhead bin. The cabin was an island of ignorance, blissfully unaware of the invisible thread that now connected Maya to a danger they couldn't comprehend. Her fingers hovered over the phone. She could ignore it. She could let it go. She could remain the invisible passenger she had fought to become. But instinct, honed over years of high-stakes missions, told her otherwise. The plane's engine spiked suddenly, a growl turning into a roar as it accelerated along the runway. Maya gripped the armrest of seat 24A around her. Seatbelts clicked, overhead bins rattled, and passengers murmured in surprise. The aircraft lifted smoothly, the city lights stretching behind it as it climbed into the dark sky. Clouds rolled past the windows, illuminated briefly by the wingtip strobes. And then she saw it. A shadow in the corner of the wing, fleeting, almost imperceptible. She leaned closer, her breath fogging the glass slightly, eyes straining. Her gut told her it was nothing, but everything in her training screamed that it was something. Something that should not be there. Maya pulled her hoodie tighter around her shoulders, sliding her phone back into her pocket. Her fingers clenched into a fist under the fabric. This was the threshold. The moment before the world tilted, before the ordinary became extraordinary, when seat 24A would stop meaning nothing and become the vantage point for everything that was about to happen. She let the music fade, earbuds dangling uselessly. Her ears strained, her eyes darted from wing to cabin, from passenger to aisle. Her breathing slowed, controlled, as she ran mental checklists faster than any pilot could. Escape routes, cabin layout, structural weak points, communication protocols. Every detail mattered, every second counted. Passengers around her carried on, oblivious. The man in the polo shirt was now complaining about the lack of snacks. A mother tried to calm her child. The flight attendant adjusted her uniform, smiling politely. All of them, unknowingly, were about to be caught in a moment that would redefine their ordinary flight into a story they would remember forever, or not at all. Maya's phone vibrated one last time. She didn't need to look. She already knew what it meant. The sky was no longer just a route from point A to B. Somewhere above, beyond the clouds, something was waiting, and it knew her name. Seat 24A had always been meaningless. Tonight it was everything. At 32,000 feet, the cabin finally settled into what should have been the monotony of flight. Drink carts squeaked across aisles, passengers clicked through streaming content on tablets, and somewhere a child cried for a tablet that wasn't charged. Maya Cross, however, did not relax. The faint metallic whine she had noticed during takeoff gnawed at her nerves like an unheeded alarm. She tilted her head slightly, listening past the muffled cabin noise, past the rhythmic vibration of the engines, past the chatter of oblivious passengers. It wasn't turbulence, it wasn't a creaking wing, it was something else, something deliberate. Her eyes flicked to the overhead bin. Nothing. She scanned the cabin, looking for patterns, anything that might explain the anomaly. The passengers seemed blissfully unaware. A woman across the aisle tapped at her phone, scrolling through social media with half attention. A man near the window adjusted his seat recline for the third time, muttering about discomfort. Maya's muscles tightened. Her instincts told her they're in danger, and they don't know it. The whine returned, this time sharper, almost surgical. She instinctively reached for the back of the seat in front of her, bracing against it. The vibration ran through her fingertips, up her arms, a subtle warning she felt more than heard. It was the kind of signal that only someone who had spent years in high-stakes operations could detect, too fast, too precise to be random. Her phone buzzed against her thigh. Another encrypted message, unidentified fast movers. Confirm receipt. She exhaled slowly, steadying her racing heart. It was real. Whatever was coming, it was tracking the plane, and she was the only one who recognized it. A sharp exclamation came from the window seat nearby. A man had leaned over to peer out, pointing. "Do you guys see that?" Passengers leaned, craning necks, trying to catch a glimpse of clouds. Nothing visible moved against the night sky. Maya ignored them. The danger wasn't visible, not yet. The first rule of engagement had always been to assess before exposing. Panic was contagious. Knowledge was power. The flight attendant passed by again, now with a nervous edge creeping into her professional demeanor. She glanced at Maya, her eyes lingering just a fraction longer than necessary. Something about the passenger in seat 24A, so ordinary, so calm, made her pause. "Everything okay?" she asked, voice polite but tense. Maya nodded once subtly. "I'm fine." Her voice carried none of the urgency she felt. She let her gaze flick back to the window, searching for shapes, movements, anything out of place. Then she saw it. A shadow flashed across the wingtip, so fast that a normal passenger would have dismissed it as a trick of the light. But Maya's mind registered it instantly. Unnatural velocity, unnatural trajectory. Her stomach tightened as she felt the familiar premonition she hadn't experienced in years. The instant recognition that the threat wasn't mechanical, wasn't terrestrial. It was airborne, and it was following them. She leaned forward slightly, trying to get a better angle. The cabin shook, but subtly, just enough to be mistaken for minor turbulence. She could see passengers gripping armrests, a few murmuring complaints, but none of them had the training to interpret what she now knew to be true. Something, or someone, was moving faster than anything commercial aviation had ever accounted for, tracking their flight path with precision. Maya's fingers itched for her phone again. Her thumb hovered over the screen. There was no hesitation in her movements, only calculation. "Confirm." She typed, fingers moving faster than the eye could follow, and sent the message. Almost instantly, her phone buzzed back, "Confirmed. F-22's en route." She swallowed. Her pulse raced. The military had been alerted, and the F-22s, two of the fastest fighter jets in the world, were already climbing to intercept. She was no longer just a passenger. She was a variable, a trigger, a line of communication between ordinary civilians and instruments of unimaginable power. A sudden jolt rocked the plane. Oxygen masks didn't drop, but passengers gripped armrests in alarm. A mother clutched her child tighter, whispering reassurances she didn't believe. The overhead bins rattled ominously. Maya remained calm outwardly, but inside every neuron was firing. The anomaly wasn't just in front of them. It was all around, something she could feel as much as she could see. She glanced at the cabin crew. The lead flight attendant's smile had vanished, replaced by a rigid tension, hands clenching at the sides of her uniform. Maya leaned closer, her voice low, almost a whisper meant for only the crew. "Listen to me. Stay calm. We're being tracked." The attendant's eyes widened, disbelief flaring. Tracked by what? Maya's lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't know, but it's not friendly." Her attention snapped to the window again. Another shadow streaked past, this time closer, faster, impossible. It was aerodynamic, deliberate, like a predator cutting the sky with surgical precision. The hum of the engine seemed almost to bend around it, a distortion she could feel through the vibration of the wing and the seat beneath her. Passengers were starting to notice now. Whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into anxious speculation. A man snapped his fingers, pointing out the window. "Look, something out there." Maya reached into her backpack, pulling out a small, unassuming device. A personal transceiver encrypted. Not illegal, not flashy, but functional. She keyed a few commands, fingers moving instinctively, sending a secure signal through a frequency only military operatives would recognize. Raptor actual, Ghost 11 activating. A subtle shift in the plane's trajectory followed almost immediately. Maya noticed it, felt it in the muscles of her back and legs, subtle but precise. The autopilot was correcting, but the corrections weren't random. They were being influenced by signals she herself had just sent. It was a language only she knew, one learned in classrooms and cockpits far above this altitude, under far more dangerous skies. The cabin lights flickered as the hum of the engines shifted, almost as if the aircraft itself was listening. Passengers leaned into windows, faces pressed against glass, trying to make sense of the unusual motion. Maya's eyes never left the wing. Another shadow darted past, momentarily illuminated by a distant flash of strobe from a neighboring plane, or was it something else? She remembered the first mission that had earned her the call sign Ghost 11. The adrenaline, the near-impossible odds, the way fear could sharpen focus rather than dull it. That same focus now pulsed through her veins, clear, precise, and unrelenting. Seat 24A had always been ordinary. Not anymore. Tonight, it was a command post, a bridge between the invisible threats above and the unprepared civilians around her. Maya's phone buzzed again. Another encrypted alert, fast mover closing. Take control. She exhaled, letting her instincts guide her. She wasn't just a passenger anymore. She was a trained operative, the only variable that could prevent catastrophe. The whine returned, now unmistakable. Passengers flinched, some crying out. A man yelled something incomprehensible. The plane shuddered slightly as if the sky itself had shifted around them. Maya gripped the armrest, knuckles white, and glanced down the aisle. The lead flight attendant met her eyes, silent, waiting for guidance. Maya leaned in, whispering just loud enough to be heard. Listen carefully. Don't panic. When I give the signal, follow instructions exactly. One wrong move and the consequences won't be contained to this cabin. The attendant nodded, trembling slightly. The passengers had no idea the severity of what was unfolding, but Maya's calm authority, even whispered, radiated control. It was the difference between chaos and order, between fear that consumed and fear that sharpened senses. Outside, the night sky was alive with motion, shadows flitting too fast for the naked eye, pings on radar, echoes on transceivers. The ordinary night flight had transformed into an invisible battlefield, with Maya at its heart. And she realized with chilling clarity the shadows weren't random. They were tracking them, calculating, waiting, testing. Seat 24A was no longer a meaningless middle-row seat. It had become the vantage point for survival, the pivot point between ordinary civilians and extraordinary danger. And the first real move had just been made. The cabin had grown quiet, almost eerily so, as if the ordinary hum of a commercial flight had been replaced by something heavier, something invisible pressing against the walls of reality. Maya Cross sat upright in seat 24A, elbows braced against the armrests, knuckles white, heart hammering against her ribs like a warning drum. Outside, the wing sliced through clouds streaked with the last remnants of sunset, but the beauty of the sky offered no comfort. Every fiber of her being screamed that tonight, the ordinary rules of flight no longer applied. Her phone vibrated again, an urgent tremor that made her stomach knot. She fished it out, glancing at the header before her brain even registered the words. Her eyes went wide. The call sign, a code she had sworn she'd never hear again, blazed across the screen. Raptor Actual Secure Channel. It was more than just a notification. It was a summons, a demand, a reminder of a life she had left behind. Her stomach turned as memories she had tried to bury surfaced like ghosts. Ghost 11. That had been her call sign in the military, in the F-22 program, the one everyone whispered about in classified corridors, the one tied to a mission that went catastrophically wrong. One hesitation, one split-second miscalculation, and it had cost lives. Her thumb hovered over the reply button. She shouldn't respond. She could ignore it. Stay anonymous. Stay alive. But instinct, honed over a decade of operations, made the decision before her conscious mind could protest. Her fingers moved, typing the code phrase she had memorized, locked in her muscle memory. Confirm. Almost instantly, The reply came brief, sharp, and authoritative. Ghost 11 confirmed. We have you, hold position. F-22's inbound. Maya exhaled, letting the air out slowly, but the relief was fleeting. Her heart still raced. The F-22s were coming. The fastest jets in the world, capable of supersonic speeds, tracking a commercial airliner across multiple states. And that meant whatever was following them wasn't ordinary. She glanced around the cabin. Passengers were beginning to notice the tension, though none could articulate it. A man in a red sweater had leaned forward, eyes wide. "Is everything okay?" he asked the flight attendant, voice trembling. The flight attendant opened her mouth, then shut it again, unsure how to respond. Maya leaned slightly toward her, voice low but steady. "We're fine, just turbulence. Sit tight." Her words were a lie, but they carried authority. The attendant nodded, uncertainty still shadowing her features, and moved down the aisle, speaking in quiet reassurances to other passengers. Maya's calm exterior was a shield, but inside, calculations spun like radar blips on a screen. She had less than 10 minutes before the situation escalated beyond the cabin. Her mind flicked back to the past, the first mission that earned her the Ghost 11 call sign. She had been 28, confident, reckless, unstoppable. A squadron had been deployed to intercept a rogue aircraft entering restricted airspace over Nevada. She had been the lead pilot, the one tasked with neutralizing the threat. The mission had gone almost perfectly until it didn't. One split-second misjudgment, one hesitation, and lives were lost. She had carried that guilt like a shadow, leaving the military soon after, seeking anonymity in the quiet spaces of civilian life. And now, as the plane hummed steadily above the clouds, that past had found her. The hum outside the fuselage shifted, a subtle vibration she felt in her chest. The shadows she had glimpsed earlier weren't just passing, they were closing. Fast, calculated, deadly. She leaned forward, pressing her palms into her knees, eyes scanning the horizon beyond the wing. The encrypted transceiver in her bag buzzed again. She activated it, fingers flying over the buttons without hesitation. Raptor Actual, Ghost 11, report incoming threat. The reply was immediate, crisp. Confirmed. Unknown fast movers detected. ETA 3 minutes. Maintain course. 3 minutes, a lifetime. Maya exhaled slowly, trying to center herself. She needed to prepare for what was coming. The ordinary protocols of commercial aviation meant nothing against the threat approaching them. She checked her seatbelt, ensuring it was tight. She subtly adjusted the overhead oxygen system, just in case. She ran mental calculations: flight path, potential evasive maneuvers, cabin safety, passenger positions. Every second mattered. A sudden shadow swept past the window again, closer this time, so close that she could see the distortion in the night air it left in its wake. The cabin's ambient noises, clinking cups, hushed conversations seemed muffled, irrelevant. Maya's entire focus narrowed to the threat, invisible but tangible, closing in with the precision of a predator. Her hand slid into her pocket, retrieving the encrypted phone again. The screen lit her face, highlighting the determination etched into her features. She typed another message, a quick, precise command: "Prepare intercept. Civilian passengers on board. Confirm containment." The reply came immediately. Acknowledged. F-22s deploying. Ghost 11 maintain calm. Situation under control. Calm? She tried to feel it, but the tension in her muscles screamed otherwise. Her mind raced through scenarios, worst-case outcomes, evasive maneuvers, structural risks to the plane, human error, but she pushed them down. Focus, instinct, precision. That had always been the difference between survival and catastrophe. Outside, the clouds shifted. Moonlight glinted off metallic shapes slicing through the darkness, impossible speeds just beyond what any ordinary passenger could perceive. The first F-22s were inbound. She could feel them through subtle changes in air pressure, the faint tremor along the plane's fuselage. Ghost 11 was alive again, not in uniform, not in a cockpit she had known for years, but here, hidden in plain sight among civilians. Maya's gaze swept the cabin. Passengers were still oblivious, though some were now whispering nervously. The flight attendant had stopped mid-aisle, tension in her shoulders, uncertainty in her eyes. Maya leaned toward her again, whispering a calm instruction. "Stay seated. Trust the crew. Everything is fine." It was a lie, but the lie had to be believed. Panic could spread faster than missiles, faster than jets. She had seen it before. She would not allow it to happen here. Her eyes flicked back to the wing. The shadows streaked past again, faster than anything she had ever seen. Calculating trajectories, estimating speeds, she realized. The unknown aircraft were tracking them, almost certainly capable of supersonic speeds. The F-22s would have to arrive quickly, or this flight, innocent passengers, oblivious crew, would be in immediate danger. Maya's thumb hovered over her phone one last time, preparing to send a final status report. Ghost 11 confirms immediate threat. F-22s intercepting. Prepare for possible evasive maneuvers. She paused. The message felt surreal. Here she was on an ordinary flight in an ordinary seat, communicating with some of the most elite fighter pilots in the world. Seat 24A was no longer ordinary. It was a command post, a lifeline, a pivot point between the mundane and the extraordinary. The first F-22 sliced across the clouds, lights gleaming, engines screaming in a way she could feel in her chest. The second followed, twin shadows locking formation, their presence almost tactile, vibrating through the air around the plane. Maya exhaled slowly, letting her shoulders relax just slightly. They were here. But that relief was fleeting. She knew the shadows wouldn't stop. They had tested the boundaries, calculated the odds. They would strike if provoked, and there was no provocation yet, only presence. Maya pressed her lips together, steeling herself. Ghost 11 had returned. And tonight, Seat 24A would witness something the world wasn't meant to see. The ordinary hum of flight had become a brittle illusion. Even as passengers fidgeted in their seats, unaware of the invisible danger closing in, Maya Cross sat upright in Seat 24A, scanning the sky with a precision that came from years of instincts she had tried desperately to bury. Every second stretched and contracted at once, a rhythm dictated by survival, not clocks. She could feel it in her bones before her eyes caught it. Movement, rapid, deliberate, impossible. The first fast mover broke through the cloud cover, a silhouette that seemed to slice through darkness and wind, a metallic streak glinting in the last pale light of the fading sun. It was bigger than a jet, smaller than a bomber, an unknown, engineered for speed and precision, the kind of aircraft that didn't belong in civilian airspace. Maya's stomach knotted. She had seen fast movers before, rogue aircraft, test prototypes, highly classified projects, but nothing she had ever encountered moved like this. She felt the vibration through the fuselage, a subtle, almost mechanical pulse that told her it was calculating, adjusting, tracking their commercial jet with relentless precision. The plane jolted slightly, an almost imperceptible shift that sent a ripple through the cabin. A few passengers gasped, gripping the armrests instinctively. The mother in 14C whispered reassurances to her child, though the fear in her eyes betrayed her uncertainty. Maya leaned forward, calm outwardly but hyper-focused inwardly. She keyed her encrypted phone again. Raptor Actual Ghost 11, confirm visual. Seconds later the reply came, crisp and immediate. Confirmed. 2 fast movers at your 3 o'clock. Vector inbound. F-22s intercepting. Maya exhaled slowly, centering herself. The F-22s were on their way, but every pilot she had trained with would tell her, sometimes the interceptor arrives too late. Sometimes the threat is already inside the envelope. She needed to prepare. Another shadow darted past the window, closer this time, moving with impossible speed. She could see subtle distortions in the air around it like heat ripples, confirming her suspicion. This was no ordinary aircraft. It was intelligent, responsive, and possibly armed. Her gaze swept the cabin. The flight attendant, now tense and alert, was watching her like a lifeline. Maya leaned closer, whispering, "Stay calm, sit tight, don't let anyone panic." A passenger in 18B, a young man in a hoodie, had been fiddling with his headphones, oblivious to the approaching danger. Maya caught his eye, raising one hand in a gesture of quiet authority. He froze, confusion and fear mingling on his face, then nodded. Obedience wasn't instinct, it was a reaction to trust. And right now, trust was all they had. Maya turned back to the window. The second fast mover appeared, even faster than the first. It streaked across the horizon, locking into a trajectory that mirrored the plane's course almost perfectly. Her stomach clenched. The plane itself hadn't even altered its flight path significantly, yet these two shapes, silent, deadly, seemed to anticipate every movement. She tapped her phone again, fingers precise. Ghost 11 to Raptor actual. Civilian jet compromised. Recommend immediate vector intercept. The response came almost instantly, urgent and clipped. Understood. F-22s in position. Maintain course. Avoid evasive maneuvers until intercept confirmed. Maya nodded to herself. Evasive action could provoke the fast movers. They needed precision, patience, control. Her mind ran through calculations. Altitude, velocity, structural limits, the untrained passengers' positions. Every variable mattered. A sudden jolt shook the cabin, more forceful this time. Overhead bins rattled. A cup toppled onto the tray table of a man in 16C. He cursed under his breath, oblivious to the real danger. Maya braced herself, forcing calm into her voice. "Everyone, please remain seated. Flight crew has everything under control," she said, steady, authoritative. Her tone didn't waver, though her mind was cataloging every movement, every vibration, every microsecond of threat assessment. Outside, the fast movers were drawing closer. She could see the sleek angles of the aircraft, aerodynamic perfection designed for speed, possibly weapons. The F-22s had now entered visual range, their iconic silhouettes flashing in formation. The interceptors were locking on, engines roaring, afterburners flaring, closing in on the unknown aircraft with deadly precision. Maya felt a pulse of relief, but it was fleeting. The fast movers hadn't engaged yet. They were waiting, calculating, testing, evaluating their prey. And the passengers, they were blissfully unaware, a moving, breathing, fragile human shield between threat and interceptor. She keyed her phone again. "Confirm intercept protocol. Civilian lives at stake." The reply came. "Confirmed. Ghost 11, maintain control. Do not engage directly. F-22s will handle it." Maya's jaw tightened. She wasn't here to fight. Not yet. She was here to protect the lives in her immediate sphere. 32 passengers, 2 flight attendants, 1 pilot and co-pilot struggling to make sense of a situation beyond any training manual. Another shadow flashed past the wingtip. This time, a subtle sonic ripple whispered through the cabin, enough to unsettle the passengers. Gasps echoed, a child whimpered, someone muttered in alarm. Maya leaned forward slightly, whispering reassurances to herself and to anyone who might notice her calm. The F-22s closed in. One of the fast movers broke formation for a moment, a sudden maneuver that sent a ripple through the night air. Maya could see the pilots inside, aware, calculating, measuring every angle. Her pulse raced, synchronizing with theirs in a strange, invisible rhythm. A thought struck her, cold and sharp. The fast movers were testing, not attacking yet, but that meant they could strike at any moment. She had seen this before, a predator sizing up its prey, and she knew instinctively that timing, control, and discipline were their only advantage. Maya glanced down the aisle. Passengers clutched their armrests, some whispering to themselves, unaware that their lives were hanging by a thread, balanced between invisible hunters and unseen guardians. She exhaled, forcing calm into her system. Panic would spread faster than the threat itself. The first fast mover attempted a maneuver too close for comfort, angling toward the fuselage. Maya pressed her palms into her knees, anchoring herself as the aircraft shuddered slightly. Outside, the F-22 responded, banking aggressively, engines screaming in near-perfect synchronization. The first engagement had begun, not with weapons but with presence, precision, and deterrence. Her phone vibrated again. A single message: Ghost 11 monitor cabin, do not expose yourself. F-22s have visual control, intercept imminent. Maya exhaled, shoulders tight but controlled. The shadows were still out there, still calculating, still testing. But the first flickers of hope appeared. The interceptors were in position, wings cutting the night sky like blades, engines roaring in unison. The predators had been identified. They had been confronted. She leaned back slightly, heart hammering, scanning the cabin one last time. Seat 24A had always been ordinary. Tonight, it had become command central, a vantage point between ordinary lives and extraordinary danger. And the first move had been made. Outside, the two unknown fast movers locked formation with the approaching F-22s, slicing through clouds in a deadly ballet. The sky wasn't empty. The danger wasn't invisible anymore. The game had begun. And Maya Cross, Ghost 11, seated in seat 24A, was at the center of it. The hum of the cabin was suddenly deafening to Maya Cross. Every clink of a tray, every cough, every whispered word from a passenger felt amplified. She pressed her palms against her knees, eyes scanning every inch of the aircraft, measuring angles, assessing vulnerabilities. Outside, the shadows moved faster now, slicing across the night sky with lethal precision. The F-22s had locked on, but the unknown fast movers weren't retreating. They were probing, testing reactions, seeking weakness. Inside, the tension was invisible but palpable. The flight attendants had been trained for turbulence, medical emergencies, maybe even a mechanical failure, but nothing like this. Their eyes darted to Maya, sensing authority she hadn't declared but radiated like a flare. She had become their silent command, the thread they clung to in the storm they didn't yet see. Her hand moved subtly to her backpack, fingers brushing the encrypted transceiver. A quick tap, a coded message: Ghost 11 active, cabin secure, await intercept. But she didn't have the luxury of waiting. She could feel the urgency of the fast movers outside, the invisible pressure of every second that passed. One wrong move, one delay, and the ordinary civilians around her would be collateral damage. Maya stood abruptly, drawing a sharp glance from the lead flight attendant. "Miss, what are you?" "Listen carefully," Maya said, voice low but commanding. The words sliced through the cabin's ambient noise like a scalpel. "No one moves unless I say. Remain calm, we have a threat. We are being monitored, tracked. Trust me. Follow instructions." The flight attendant froze, recognition dawning in her eyes. Something about Maya's posture, the subtle intensity in her voice, screamed authority. Her training, while limited, understood instinct when it saw it. She nodded, swallowing her fear. Maya moved swiftly down the aisle, pausing only to make eye contact with key passengers. A few of them were growing anxious, murmuring, glancing at the overhead bins or the windows, noticing shadows that passed like ghosts. She intercepted them with calm, precise instructions. "Remain seated. Do not attempt to use your phones. Trust the crew. Do not panic." Her presence alone seemed to slow the rising tide of panic. People complied, confused but obedient. There was something about her, the way she carried certainty, that made ordinary civilians trust her, even without understanding why. She returned to the lead flight attendant. "We need to secure the cockpit," Maya whispered. "The captain and co-pilot are unaware of the full situation. I'll handle the communication. You manage the cabin." The flight attendant hesitated, then nodded, trembling but compliant. Maya approached the cockpit door, pressing her palm flat against it. A subtle vibration echoed back, almost a hum, as the unknown fast movers outside adjusted their positions, testing their target. "Captain," she said, voice firm yet calm, "there's an airborne threat we cannot identify. You will follow my instructions for the next 5 minutes. Trust me." There was silence on the other side, then a crackle of acknowledgement. The captain's voice, cautious but receptive, came through. "Understood, ma'am. What are your instructions?" Maya exhaled slowly, centering herself. She had rehearsed for scenarios like this, but never in a commercial cabin filled with innocent civilians. She tapped her transceiver again. "Ghost 11 to Raptor Actual. Visual update. Unknown fast movers closing. Intercept in T-90 seconds. No evasive action without my command." Seconds ticked by like hours. Outside, the fast movers streaked closer, cutting arcs across the sky that defied conventional aviation logic. They were calculating, precise, hunting. But the F-22s held formation, closing the gap, engines screaming through the clouds. Inside, Maya shifted focus back to the cabin. She had to anticipate every panic reaction, every impulsive move from passengers who didn't understand the stakes. She moved swiftly down the aisle again, her presence commanding attention. A man in row 16 was fumbling with his phone. Maya's eyes snapped to him. "Put that away, now." He froze, then slowly lowered the device, eyes wide. She didn't smile. She couldn't afford to. She merely nodded and moved on. Every action reinforced authority. Every pause held weight. Every whispered command was law. The plane shuddered slightly as the first fast mover executed a maneuver just outside, testing the envelope of the aircraft. Passengers gripped armrests, a child whimpered, a man muttered under his breath. Maya's heartbeat synced with the subtle vibrations running through the floor. She could feel the precision of the unknown aircraft, their intelligence, their intent. She returned to the cockpit door, placing her hand on the small window to catch the captain's eye. "We need to maintain altitude and course. The F-22s have them contained, but do not make sudden movements. Any evasive action could provoke a response." The captain nodded, hands steadying on the controls. Maya exhaled. She had them under control for now. Her phone vibrated again. "Threat vector updated. Unknown craft maneuvering to flank. Maintain intercept. Ghost 11 cabin secure." "Yes," she replied immediately, fingers flying over the keypad. Her eyes swept the cabin. All passengers seated, flight attendants tense but obedient, no one out of position. "Cabin secure," she said aloud, firm enough for anyone who might hear. She leaned back against the aisle wall, scanning the cabin one last time before returning to the center of operations. Her instincts were a fine-tuned radar, reading micro-expressions, minute shifts in body language, the subtle tremor of fear in a hand. She could feel tension building like static electricity, waiting for a spark. Outside, the unknown fast movers split formation, one angling closer to the plane's wingtip, the other diving slightly behind, attempting a strategic maneuver. Maya's heart hammered. The interceptors, those two supersonic F-22s, responded instantly, banking, flaring, asserting control over the sky. Her fingers hovered over her transceiver again. "Ghost 11 to Raptor Actual. Engagement window opening. Civilian airliner at risk. Recommend visual containment until intercept resolution." The reply was immediate. "Acknowledged. F-22s maintaining formation. Threat engagement in progress." Maya exhaled, trying to project calm even as adrenaline surged. She had to remain the anchor for everyone on board. Panic was the enemy now as much as the fast movers outside. She moved back to the center aisle, shoulders squared, voice steady. "Everyone listen carefully," she said, soft but commanding. "You are safe. Follow instructions. Seat belts fastened. Remain calm. The crew and I are handling this." Some passengers looked at her with suspicion, others with awe. The authority in her stance, the precision in her movements, the calm certainty in her tone, it radiated a power they couldn't name but instinctively obeyed. She returned to the cockpit one final time. "Captain, you have my guidance. Do not deviate. The F-22s will handle the threat." The pilot nodded. "Understood, Ghost 11, you have complete control." The plane shuddered again as a sonic ripple passed overhead, a warning the fast movers were attempting a maneuver closer than comfort allowed. Maya pressed her hands flat against her knees, forcing her calm into every fiber of her body. Every movement had been calculated, every instruction precise. The plane was her chessboard, the passengers unwitting pawns protected by her strategy. A brief flash of lightning, or was it the glint of the fast movers' metallic surfaces, illuminated the cabin briefly. Maya's eyes locked on it, trained instinctively to detect threat vectors, anticipate trajectories, calculate safe margins. The F-22s mirrored her calculations in the sky, executing maneuvers that no ordinary pilot could comprehend. The unknown aircraft had tested them, nudged them, but it had not yet struck. That hesitation gave Maya the window she needed, the chance to keep the passengers safe, and the authority to maintain order in the face of chaos. Seat 24A had never been anything. Now it was command central, a pivot point between chaos and control, between life and death. Ghost 11 had returned, not in uniform, not in cockpit flight suits, but among civilians, blending in while orchestrating survival with precision and calm. And for the first time, Maya allowed herself a flicker of grim satisfaction. The ordinary flight had become extraordinary, and she, at seat 24A, was its unlikely hero. The F-22s flared again, shadows streaking across the sky, signaling that the intercept had begun. Outside, the unknown fast movers had made their first move. Inside, Maya Cross was ready. And nothing, absolutely nothing, was going to break her control over what happened next. The night sky was no longer empty. Shadows streaked past the plane, cutting through clouds with lethal precision. Maya Cross remained at seat 24A, upright, muscles coiled like springs, eyes flicking constantly between cabin, wing, and the unseen threat beyond the fuselage. The fast movers weren't just fast, they were calculating, intelligent, aware. And yet the F-22s had arrived. The first interceptor tore across the horizon, landing in her peripheral vision like a silver bullet against the dark canvas of clouds. Its twin flares glinted sharply, illuminating the edges of the fast movers in fleeting bursts. The second F-22 mirrored the first, slicing across the sky in formation, engines screaming, afterburners flaring. Maya could feel the resonance of their power through the cabin, vibrations subtly threading through the metal floor beneath her feet, through the seats, through the plane itself. Her thumb hovered over her encrypted transceiver. A simple command, a line of text she had typed 100 times in simulations, and now it was real. Ghost 11 to Raptor Actual. Confirm visual intercept. Unknown fast movers engaged. The reply was immediate, crisp, and unmistakably urgent. Confirmed, Ghost 11. Unknown craft contained. Maintain cabin security. Visual engagement in progress. Call sign recognized. Maya exhaled, letting the tension ease fractionally, but only fractionally. The phrase "call sign recognized" was more than protocol. It was acknowledgement, the rare validation that the elite pilots in those F-22s knew exactly who she was, and the skill, precision, and past failures that name represented. For a moment, she allowed herself to recall the mission that had earned her the Ghost 11 identity. It had been a routine intercept until it was. A civilian jet entered restricted airspace. Decisions were split-second. She hesitated once, cost lives, and carried the weight of that mistake in every calculated movement ever since. Tonight, she had no hesitation. The plane shuddered slightly, a subtle vibration that sent a ripple through passenger seats. Maya glanced at the wing, and for the first time the fast movers revealed themselves fully in her view. Sleek, metallic, impossible geometries reflecting the moonlight, their movements precise, methodical, almost predatory. She traced their trajectory in her mind, calculating speed, potential weapon ranges, response vectors. The F-22s responded instantly, banking aggressively to block the aircraft from closing on the commercial airliner. The lead pilot, now fully aware of her call sign, coordinated with precision, mimicking her internal calculations, a silent choreography that only trained minds could perform in perfect tandem. Ghost 11, the transceiver buzzed again, voice clipped, urgent but respectful. We have visual, fast movers tracking commercial jet. Maintain course. Do not attempt evasive action. Confirmation, call sign active. We see you. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She wasn't here to be seen. She was here to control, to manage, to orchestrate survival. The acknowledgement of her identity was comforting and dangerous. Recognition meant they were taking her commands seriously, trusting her judgment. But it also meant the F-22s were aware that the stakes were human lives, not abstract protocol. Maya's eyes scanned the cabin again. Passengers remained oblivious, some staring out the window, others murmuring quietly, none understanding that their ordinary flight was now the epicenter of a life-and-death ballet in the clouds above. The flight attendants, tense but obedient, followed her subtle gestures, shifting passengers' positions when necessary, tightening seatbelts, adjusting trays, maintaining calm with quiet authority. She keyed the transceiver again, providing updates in rapid, precise bursts. Ghost 11 to Raptor actual. Fast movers approaching 6 o'clock. Wingtip proximity. Recommend containment vector delta. Civilian airliner at risk if maneuvered incorrectly. The F-22s responded with perfection. A flash of engine afterburners illuminated the cockpit in one of the jets, and for a fleeting second, Maya could see the pilot, helmeted, focused, calculating exactly the way she would. Their movements synchronized almost instinctively, a silent confirmation that her commands were being implemented flawlessly. A sudden jolt rocked the plane, not strong enough to alarm trained hands but enough for passengers to flinch. The fast movers had attempted a probing maneuver, testing their prey. Maya pressed her palms against her knees, steadying herself. This was the critical moment. The predators were assessing vulnerability. A wrong response could escalate everything. She whispered into the transceiver, Ghost 11 to Raptor actual, maintain intercept, hold formation, confirm wing clearance and cabin integrity. The reply, confirmed, fast movers contained visually, do not adjust flight path, stand by for engagement. Maya exhaled. The tension in the cabin was invisible but real, and she maintained control by radiating calm authority. She moved subtly down the aisle, glancing at passengers, offering reassuring nods, subtle gestures that conveyed safety without explaining the impossible reality beyond the fuselage. Every second counted. Every reaction could save lives. Outside, the F-22s executed their maneuvers with razor-sharp precision. One of the fast movers attempted another rapid flank, banking aggressively toward the commercial plane. Maya's stomach tightened. The plane shuddered again. She leaned slightly forward, watching, calculating, anticipating the next move. Ghost 11, the transceiver buzzed, urgency laced with tension. The unknown craft is attempting proximity vector. Recommend restraint. Confirm cabin stability. Cabin stable, she replied, keeping her tone calm but precise. Maintain intercept. Engagement timing critical. Do not provoke. She glanced around the cabin once more. A young woman in 20D clutched the armrest tightly, eyes wide. A child whispered to a parent. Maya's eyes met theirs, calm, reassuring, commanding. Obedience in chaos. Survival through presence. That was the difference between panic and strategy. Outside, the F-22s flared again, engines screaming in synchrony. Their afterburners cast sharp shadows across the clouds, illuminating the sleek shapes of the fast movers for a moment that felt eternal. Maya felt a surge of grim satisfaction. The intercept was working, but the predators hadn't fully engaged yet. They were testing, sizing up, probing for weakness. Her mind raced. Every calculation she had made in simulations, every training exercise, every mission replayed in her memory, it all funneled into this single, excruciating moment. The F-22s were executing perfectly, but the unknown fast movers were unpredictable, intelligent, aggressive. The slightest misstep could be catastrophic. She keyed the transceiver one last time. Ghost 11 to Raptor Actual. Confirm threat containment. Prepare for possible engagement window. Civilian airliner stability priority. The response was almost immediate. Confirmed, Ghost 11. Visual containment maintained. Threat engagement imminent. Call sign acknowledged. We have you. Maya allowed herself a brief, controlled exhale. The F-22s were fully engaged, locking the fast movers in a deadly ballet above them. The predators had been identified, contained, and temporarily neutralized, not destroyed but checked. The plane shuddered one final time as a subtle sonic ripple passed. Maya leaned back slightly in her seat, knuckles unclenching, shoulders releasing fractionally. Seat 24A had transformed completely. It was no longer ordinary. It had become command central, the nerve center for survival, and the fulcrum upon which life or death balanced. The passengers remained oblivious to the magnitude of the crisis, trusting, whether consciously or not, the calm authority of a woman who had returned to her Ghost 11 identity in the nick of time. Outside, the shadows of the fast movers still lingered, sleek and menacing, but the F-22s held formation, engines screaming, precision unmatched. Maya knew the danger wasn't gone, but it was contained. And in that moment, the acknowledgement of her call sign, the recognition of her skill, history, and authority changed everything. Ghost 11 was back, and for the first time in years, the sky itself answered her presence. Seat 24A had meant nothing once. Tonight, it was the epicenter of survival. The hum of the engines, steady now, should have been comforting. But for Maya Cross, it was merely a reminder of how close the world had come to unraveling in the span of minutes. The unknown fast movers had broken off their pursuit, banking sharply into the darkness beyond the clouds, retreating for reasons she could only guess. The F-22s flared one last time, signaling containment before peeling away to patrol distant airspace. The cabin, however, was not yet calm. Even though the immediate threat had receded, the energy remained taut like a bowstring ready to snap. Passengers shifted uneasily in their seats, whispering, glancing at the windows, and occasionally at each other. The flight attendants moved methodically, masking tension, but Maya could see it in their eyes, the disbelief, the silent question. What just happened? She leaned forward slightly from seat 24A, scanning the cabin. Her presence had become the anchor, but even anchors needed reinforcement. She exhaled slowly, projecting calm. "Everyone," she said, voice low but firm, "the situation is under control. The turbulence you felt was unusual, but we are safe now. Please remain seated until the captain advises otherwise." A few passengers nodded, reassured by her confidence, while others glanced around with lingering unease. Maya allowed herself a brief assessment of the cabin. Belts fastened, children secure, adults attentive, no loose objects that could become hazards in sudden maneuvers. Everything within her zone of responsibility was stabilized, but the psychological storm remained. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, another encrypted message. Ghost 11, threat disengaged visually. F-22s holding patrol. Confirm cabin security and passenger stability. "Cabin secure," she replied immediately. Fingers steady, voice calm. She didn't explain her own racing heartbeat, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins, or the weight of knowing the predators outside were retreating, but not gone. She leaned back slightly, momentarily allowing herself a fraction of reflection. Seat 24A, which had once been meaningless, a neutral middle-of-the-plane perch, was now the nerve center of a crisis that could have ended in catastrophe. She thought of the passengers, ordinary people who had been unaware that their lives were at the mercy of unseen hunters and elite intercept pilots. And for the first time in years, Maya allowed herself a flicker of pride. But pride was fleeting. Ghost 11 was trained for aftermaths, for consequences. She needed to think ahead. The predators had not been neutralized, they had been deterred. If they returned or if another threat emerged, the passengers would be completely exposed. She tapped her transceiver again. Raptor Actual Ghost 11. Predictive vectors suggest retreat is temporary. Recommend continued visual patrol. Civilian flight path remains vulnerable. The reply was almost instant. Acknowledged. F-22s maintaining visual hold. Ghost 11, you have command of cabin. Prepare for possible secondary engagement. Her eyes scanned the cabin again. The flight attendants were quietly whispering to each other, exchanging glances that spoke volumes. Maya moved to the aisle, gesturing subtly to reinforce seating positions and minimize potential hazards. She whispered instructions where needed, ensuring seatbelts were fastened, children were calm, and no one was touching emergency doors or electronic devices that could distract or harm them. Her mind flicked to the pilots in the cockpit. Even though the plane itself was now stable, the human factor remained critical. She leaned slightly toward the cockpit door, speaking quietly through the comm panel. "Captain, the threat has disengaged for now. Maintain current altitude and course. Do not deviate unless I advise." "Understood, Ghost 11," came the calm reply. "Course stable. Cabin integrity monitored." She allowed herself a fraction of relief. For the moment, the immediate danger had passed, but she couldn't let herself relax. Ghost 11 had always understood that calm could lull one into catastrophe. Even as the shadows receded, she knew better than anyone that predators tested, they observed, they waited for miscalculations. Her gaze shifted to the passengers again. Some were beginning to whisper among themselves, murmurs carrying concern and disbelief. Maya moved closer, voice calm, soft, but carrying authority. "You've all been safe. The crew and I managed the situation. You're fine. Please stay seated until the captain gives the all clear." A man in row 15 finally spoke aloud, shaking. What just happened? Did anyone else see that?" Maya met his eyes directly, steady and unflinching. "You're safe now, that's what matters." The man's gaze lingered on her, trying to reconcile the calm certainty in her demeanor with the adrenaline-fueled chaos he had sensed through the vibrations and subtle shifts of the plane. For a moment, he understood instinctively that she wasn't ordinary. She moved back toward seat 24A, running mental calculations of what had occurred, what was ongoing, and what might follow. The fast movers were gone for now, but F-22 pilots rarely engaged in pursuit for long, especially when civilians were involved. They had contained the threat, yes, but if the unknown aircraft were designed for more than reconnaissance, this encounter might not be the last. Her transceiver buzzed again. "Ghost 11, Raptor Actual. Threat still unclassified. Predictive engagement window closes in T-10 minutes. Recommend passenger management and secondary readiness." "Understood," she replied, fingers flying, calculating contingencies. She leaned slightly forward, whispering to the flight attendant nearest her. "Keep the passengers calm. Avoid speculation. Any nervous movements, any alarm could escalate them unnecessarily. Maintain composure." The flight attendant nodded, swallowing hard. Her respect for Maya's authority had deepened in mere minutes. The passengers didn't know it yet, but their survival depended on that authority. Maya's mind flicked to the larger picture. She had trained for aerial threats, high-speed intercepts, strategic engagement, but she had never done this in a commercial cabin full of untrained civilians. Every move she had made had to account for the human element, the unpredictable variable of fear, confusion, and instinct. She scanned the aisle quickly, noting subtle signs. Hands gripping armrests too tightly, tense shoulders, eyes darting anxiously. She made a mental note of who might need reassurance, who might react impulsively if the situation escalated again. Outside, the faint hum of the F-22's engines lingered in the distance, a reassuring presence that Maya could sense even through the fuselage. The predators had not returned, but she knew they could, and she knew their behavior now, testing, probing, calculating, was only the beginning. She moved back to the center aisle, voice calm but firm. "Everyone, we are safe now. You may notice unusual movements outside, lights or shadows, but you are secure. Trust the crew and follow instructions. We will let you know if anything changes." Some passengers nodded, others remained tense, but all seemed to instinctively obey. Maya allowed herself a brief scan of the cabin, seeing order maintained, minor fear suppressed, control intact. A flash of lightning, or perhaps the reflection of an afterburner, lit the clouds briefly outside. Maya's pulse quickened instinctively. Even in retreat, the shadows were dangerous. She pressed her hands flat against her knees, grounding herself, reminding herself that Ghost 11 was alive here, in this seat in this cabin, with lives depending on her precision. Her transceiver buzzed one last time. Ghost 11, Raptor Actual. Maintain cabin command. Predictive threat window closed. F-22s on station. Stand by for post-engagement debrief. She exhaled slowly, shoulders releasing fractionally, yet remaining coiled for action. Seat 24A had transformed completely. It had been ordinary. It had been meaningless. Tonight, it had been the nerve center for survival, the pivot point between ordinary passengers and extraordinary danger. And she knew, as she looked around at the frightened but obedient faces of those she had protected, that the storm was not over. Ghost 11's return to command had saved them once, but the night sky was wide, the unknown aircraft unpredictable, and the predators might yet return. Seat 24A was no longer just a seat. It was the anchor of survival, the fulcrum of calm in chaos, the place where a ghost had returned to shape the fate of the living. Maya allowed herself one long breath. One. She needed the focus, the clarity, the precision for whatever came next. The shadows had retreated, but the storm remained. The night had grown colder, the sky stretching endlessly in inky black above the commercial plane. Clouds scudded past, illuminated sporadically by the distant, flashing lights of the F-22s. The shadows that had stalked them earlier were no longer just threats. They were a looming challenge, an impossible puzzle of speed, precision, and deadly intent. Maya Cross remained in seat 24A, but she was no longer passive. She was Ghost 11, alive in the body of a woman seated among ordinary civilians, commanding authority that could mean life or death. Her eyes flicked from the cockpit to the aisle, then to the window, tracing every subtle shift in air pressure, every ripple of light against the clouds. The unknown fast movers were returning. She could sense them before she could see them, a faint vibration through the fuselage, a whisper of turbulence, a pulse in the air. The predators had tested, retreated, and now they were back. Her transceiver buzzed urgently. Ghost 11, Raptor Actual. Unknown fast movers re-engaging. ETA 2 minutes. Prepare civilian airliner containment. Maya's fingers tightened around the device, typing with the precision of decades of training. Confirmed. Cabin secure. All passengers seated. Flight crew briefed. Visual intercept ready. Ghost 11 active. A metallic streak flashed past the window. The first of the fast movers cutting across the night with impossible speed, banking sharply toward the commercial jet. The second followed, synchronized like hunters in formation, eyes invisible but intentions crystal clear. Maya's stomach tensed. The stakes were absolute. One miscalculation and dozens of innocent lives could be lost. She stood, moving with deliberate calm down the aisle, reinforcing control. The flight attendants mirrored her movements, ensuring seatbelts were fastened, passengers were reassured, and nothing in the cabin could become a hazard. "Everyone," Maya said, voice low but commanding, "the situation outside is under control. Remain seated. Follow instructions, trust the crew. Her words were measured, but every syllable carried authority born of experience, of danger faced and survived countless times before. The passengers obeyed, some still confused, some beginning to grasp the gravity, but all anchored by her presence. She returned to the cockpit, speaking quietly into the intercom. "Captain, the fast movers are re-engaging. Maintain altitude and course. F-22s are on intercept. Do not deviate without my instruction." "Understood, Ghost 11," the captain replied, voice steady. "Course stable." Outside, the sky erupted into motion. The F-22s flared, engines screaming, afterburners blazing, cutting through darkness to block and contain the unknown craft. Ghost 11's command in the cockpit was mirrored by the pilot's precision. The two sides moved in a deadly, synchronized dance, calculating velocity, trajectory, distance. Every second mattered. The first fast mover surged forward, banking sharply, testing the intercept. Maya calculated, anticipating every movement. She keyed her transceiver. "Ghost 11 to Raptor Actual. Predictive vectors indicate approach vector delta. Maintain intercept. Civilian airliner integrity priority." "Confirmed, Ghost 11. Engaging containment," came the reply. The unknown craft flashed again, banking around the commercial jet, but the F-22s responded instantly, locking formation, engines roaring, forcing the Predators into a tactical retreat. Ghost 11 had orchestrated a perfect aerial cordon. The sky was no longer just a battlefield, it was a theater of command, and Maya was the conductor. A ripple of relief brushed through her, but she remained hyper-alert. The fast movers were clever, they were precise, they were patient. One wrong adjustment, one hesitation, could allow them to breach containment. She turned back to the cabin, scanning passengers. The mother in 14C held her child tightly, whispering reassurances. A young man in 18B gripped the armrest, eyes wide. The flight attendants moved methodically, reassured by her steady presence. Maya allowed herself one subtle smile. Control here had been maintained. But the sky demanded vigilance. The Predators had not fully retreated. A faint vibration signaled a split maneuver. Maya's eyes narrowed. "They're probing," she muttered under her breath, "testing the envelope." Her fingers flew over the transceiver again. "Ghost 11 to Raptor Actual. Fast movers splitting formation. Engagement likely in 30 seconds. Confirm intercept containment vectors." The reply was immediate. "Confirmed. F-22s locking formation. Ghost 11 maintain cabin control. Civilian airliner integrity paramount." The first fast mover attempted a bold maneuver, banking sharply toward the fuselage. Maya pressed her palms into her knees, heart pounding, calculating margins, angles, risk. She whispered a command into the transceiver. "Adjust intercept angle. Maintain safe distance from commercial jet. Do not engage directly until containment confirmed." Seconds stretched into eternity. Outside, the sky erupted in light as the F-22s executed their maneuvers flawlessly. Engines screamed. Afterburners flared. Shadows streaked across clouds, reflected in the occasional passenger window. The fast movers had underestimated the precision of both Ghost 11 and the intercept pilots. They faltered, then retreated, forced back into containment. Maya exhaled slowly, shoulders uncoiling fractionally. The immediate threat had been neutralized, not destroyed, but forced to disengage. The F-22s remained in patrol, wings flaring like guardian angels across the night sky. Inside, the cabin tension began to ease. Some passengers whispered in disbelief. Others looked at Maya with a mix of awe and gratitude. She moved down the aisle, voice calm, measured, but carrying authority. "You are safe now," she said softly. "The situation outside has been contained. Remain seated until the captain gives the all clear. You have been remarkable. Trust the crew. They know what to do." A collective exhale rippled through the cabin. People had survived something unimaginable without even realizing the extent of the danger. Ghost 11 had orchestrated their survival with precision and authority that none could see but all instinctively trusted. Her phone buzzed one final time. Ghost 11 Raptor actual. Threat neutralized visually. Engagement window closed. All systems nominal. Civilian airliner secure. Maya allowed herself a long, slow breath, one she had denied herself for the entire ordeal. Seat 24A, once meaningless, had become a fulcrum of life and death. Ordinary passengers, oblivious to the crisis outside, had survived because of her instincts, training, and courage. She glanced out the window one last time, watching the distant flashes of the F-22s as they held formation and slowly faded into the horizon. The sky had remembered her name. Ghost 11 was alive, commanding, decisive, and untouchable in her precision. The cabin remained quiet, tension slowly dissolving into relief. Maya leaned back in seat 24A, muscles finally relaxing. She allowed herself a moment to reflect. She had commanded authority among civilians. She had coordinated with elite fighter pilots through a crisis invisible to everyone else. She had survived a direct encounter with unknown, lethal aircraft and preserved every life on board. The storm had passed, the shadows had retreated, but in that moment Maya Cross, Ghost 11, realized that ordinary life had no claim on her anymore. The sky was hers again, and seat 24A had become legendary, if only in the silent gratitude of those she had saved. Passengers began to murmur, whispering among themselves, still shaken but safe. Flight attendants nodded at her, a quiet acknowledgement passing through the cabin. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We have received clearance to continue our flight. You are safe, and we will be landing shortly. On behalf of the crew, thank you for remaining calm during an unusual situation." Maya allowed herself a subtle smile. They would never know what had truly occurred, but they didn't need to. They were alive, and sometimes that was enough. Her transceiver buzzed one last time. "Ghost 11, you've done well. F-22's disengaging. All systems nominal. Welcome back, Ghost 11." She pressed the device into her lap, exhaling slowly, shoulders finally releasing their tension. Seat 24A had meant nothing once. Tonight, it had been everything. And as the commercial jet glided through the night sky, Maya Cross, Ghost 11, sat quietly, knowing the sky would remember her name long after this ordinary flight had landed safely.